Well, welcome back to Taming Toxic Plants. This is an effort by the University of Wyoming Extension to give advice to ranchers and range managers in managing toxic plants. My name is Derek Scasta, and today I'm going to be talking about grass tetany, which is a really critical issue as we head into the spring of the year. So, grass tetany is considered an emergency situation as death can occur very rapidly within a matter of hours. It goes by a number of different names, things like grass staggers, wheat pasture poisoning, magnesium, tetany, and hypomagnesia. And this is really an issue when we're grazing cool season grasses in the spring. In other words, when we have that lush spring pasture growth. Now, grass tetany can affect cattle, sheep, and horses. So all classes of livestock are susceptible. And essentially, it's a problem where there's low blood magnesium, sometimes calcium, which can affect neuromuscular activity. Now, cows with calves tend to be the most susceptible, but older cows that are in early lactation, young cows or sometimes dry cows, and then growing calves, particularly young and growing calves, sometimes those kind of younger stocker cattle can be a problem too. Now, toxic plants that are generally toxic in other ways can cause grass tetany, but sometimes it's plants that we don't really consider to be toxic that are noted to cause grass tetany. And this is going to be primarily our cool season grasses, many of which we intentionally plant for winter or spring grazing. So this can include some of our cultivated small grains like oats, barley, rye, triticale, wheat, reed canary grass, and sometimes ryegrass. But some of those other plants that can cause problems include things like the greasewood shrub, purslane, which you can see in the top right here, and then wood sorrel or oxalis, which you can see this little yellow flower. It's a very small plant here in the bottom right. Now, in terms of causes, there's really kind of two scenarios, and these can intersect and cause problems that lead to grass tetany in grazing animals. The first is conditions that affect the magnesium concentration and availability in the forage. So some of those conditions can include things like high levels of soil potassium. Now, that can negatively affect soil magnesium uptake by the plants, and ultimately it reduces magnesium availability to the animal, leading to low magnesium or hypomagnesia issues. In addition, high nitrogen content of grass, sometimes as a function of nitrogen fertilizer, can also reduce magnesium availability. Now, sometimes it is soils that might be naturally high in potassium or sometimes aluminum. Now, the second kind of confounding issue is the timing of plant growth and ultimately grazing. So most frequently, this is a problem in the spring when cool season grasses are growing very rapidly. It can also occur in the fall, especially if we get kind of a bimodal rain fall pattern and we get some new growth of cool season grasses in the fall. And this often follows a cool period between 45 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit when we get into these kinds of situations. Now, in terms of signs and symptoms, affected animals can become excited. They can have a wild stare, sometimes appearing to be blind. And then there can be some uncoordinated behavior where they're leaning backwards or stumbling and falling. And then rapid death is unfortunately one of the signs. In terms of progression, I have these 9 kind of progressive signs and symptoms. The first thing is animals might start grazing alone away from the herd. Secondly, they might appear to be irritable. Third, they might have muscular twitching, particularly in their flanks. Fourth, they can have this wide-eyed appearance, staring off into the distance. Fifth, there can be this muscular incoordination, sometimes stiffness of the muscles. Number 6 is staggering around. Number 7 is they may collapse. Number 8, they may be thrashing around. And then number 9, and this would be the most advanced stages, their head might be thrown back. They may go into a coma, and then ultimately they may die. So understanding that progression, if you were to identify affected animals, you might know where within that kind of progressive state they may be. Now, in terms of treatment, there are some options that are available. Now, efficacy of treatment can vary depending on the clinical stage of the animal, how far along they have progressed. If treatment is administered within 1 to 2 hours after symptoms develop, quick recovery is possible. It is suggested that you observe cattle in particular twice per day so you can quickly identify affected animals. And treatment includes an IV injection of a commercially prepared magnesium and calcium dextrose-based solution. You can see I have an example on the screen here, the CMPK injection. And of course, I'd recommend you consult with a veterinarian if you think you're in this kind of a situation. But it would be important to be proactive about it and have medication on hand before you turn those cattle out into those pastures with that lush spring growth. Now, that's animal treatment. We can also think about mitigation, more proactive approaches. So first of all, we can avoid these contributing conditions generally. This can include avoiding grazing cattle on new grass until it reaches 4 to 6 inches of height. We can also graze less susceptible animals in those high-risk pastures, including heifers, dry cows, or cows with some of those older calves. And then sometimes those heavier stockers don't seem to have as much of an issue. In addition, we can feed a magnesium supplement, and that can help mitigate these problems. And then finally, we can include legumes in these kind of cool season grass mixtures. So legumes would include things like alfalfa, and they can have 2 times the magnesium concentration as compared to grasses, and they can kind of help mitigate that low magnesium concentration. So again, here's these resources I like to refer to. I just like to circle back and give you all those potential references you could turn to. And then, of course, there's my email if I can be of help to you. And finally, if poisoning does occur, always consult with a veterinarian or a medical professional. So stay tuned for more plants and disorders to be covered in this Taming Toxic Plants series.